Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. Gonna push a button here. There we go. Things should be all set. Hello again. How are you doing today? We're going to be continuing our game coding project. See how far along we get. Now, let's see here. Cat-wise, we do have Sherbet. It is apparently bath time on camera 1 there. Sky is up in his tree, and then we have Sammy and Ember on the bed. Ember has taken over the pillow, which has displaced Sammy up to the blanket. Not sure where Mason has gotten off to. He might be on the bed as well. Someday I will remember to reposition that camera to get more of the area so that you can see if Mason is snoozing there as well. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, our coding project. Last time, we have the camera on. There we go. Last time, we got the player object switched over to the new format. So we have a player collision zone now. What this has allowed us to do is spawn the player in. We don't have to have the player follows the same collision rules as everything else, and we don't have to have the player set up in the same fashion anymore. So we do things like we attach the camera to it, which gives us some mobility in detaching the camera, moving it to other objects, that kind of thing. Could be interesting. Today, one of the things that we want to get to is testing some logic for creating modified weapons. So we've tried randomizing the weapons before. That works, changing some of their movement patterns and the like. Varying count, varying grouping, that sort of thing, varying flight patterns. So now we want to try setting it up so that we have a system for rebuilding that weaponry whenever we need it to. This will eventually extend into the classic kind of level up or find item mechanics in this sort of game, where at those intervals you get a choice of power up or similar, and that it builds and builds. One of the differences with this game we want to start with is that you choose an upgrade to apply to a weapon. For now, we're not going to consider things like we're not to the point where we're going to consider particulars or balance or anything like that. We're just going to get the systems in place. I can already think that there are some things that need to be a little different because we want sequence of upgrades to be very important. It's the kind of thing that I've always wanted to see in things like Civ games, where it's important what order technologies appear in. But in this case, it will be important what order the power-ups flow in. Eventually. But to do that, we created a temporary object called the item giver. We're going to be using this for debugging purposes and testing purposes initially. Everything's functional here. Yup. Okay. So this thing is debug purposes. Hey there, Colin. It's moving along. I was just giving our summary, but today what we're going to be moving on to, what we're going to be working on, is using this testing object to modify an existing spawner, an existing weapon on the player. Which means we're going to have to go into things like the player object and set up like buckets for weapons. This testing code that we did adds another spawner to the player every time they touch it. So around the edge of the screen, we're going to be getting these little bubbles appearing. They don't move. They only go away if I touch them, but if I touch one, it will create a mouse weapon spawner on us here. So we have one every 5 seconds, really slow, And as we touch more of them, the rate at which the mice emit will increase. This is going to be the basic pattern for acquiring new weapons is, more weapons means more things emitting from you at a greater pace usually. And this gets out of control in our testing scenario very quickly as we get more and more and more things. So one of the things that we want to do is add logic for adding weapons to the player, removing weapons from the player. So there's going to need to be an identification system for them, so that we have the option of saying remove this one, add this one. Identifying them as well will be a way for us when we get an upgrade to point at a weapon and say that one's getting the upgrade this time, so that we can adjust it. I want to be able to adjust it, but I don't know if we're going to be able to adjust it or if we'll need to destroy and recreate it. We'll see how that plays out. Let's see here. So this is our test code for now. Bubble gives you a weapon and goes away. So let's go into our player here. What's this code? This is the you touched a bubble code. It creates the weapon spawning object, the weapon homing mouse. It graphs it onto the player. It tells the spawner, follow this object, and then it adds it to the player's tree so that if the player goes away, the weapons go away. And then we get rid of the bubble. So here's our player object. I've still got to adjust that sprite so it's a little to the right, so that it's centered better. Right now, there's a great deal more of the sprite to the left of center, so when it flips over, it's displaced more, and more of the bubble is not around it. So the hitbox is a little wonky on these. We'll be getting to that kind of thing later. For now, the wind-up mouse is our placeholder weapon. Okay, so we go into our player body script. Gonna want to move this logic out of there. The animation logic could stay in. That's okay. On ready is going to be one of the places that we have to go into, I think. If I add... We're going to add a child node that is just a node. I'm going to rename it test. And we're going to do an onReady test is a node, which is equal to test. And then during process, I'm just gonna it's print debug, or is it debug print debug? Okay, good. Force it to be a string, and it will be test.name. I think name is a node property. Okay, I think it fails right away. That is interesting. Means our player script has a flaw in it. Does it? Strange. Player from player body script. Oh, here we go. Oh, foolish, foolish. Declaring a variable. Hey there, Shen. Indeed, those are two of my cats. It is top to bottom Sammy and Ember. And that seems to have worked. Yep, that's working. Okay. This opens doors for us here. Can we go into a movement object now and make this work? Just doing a quick test. Since that worked, that is interesting. Because if we look at our movement scene, it does not have a property that we want. Yeah. We create a movement templates node and name it movement templates. But what if we just have a node? I thought we tried this before and it failed. How we doing, folks? How we doing? $2 We do that. It's like get child. It's not. Let's look up this symbol and see if we can find it. Don't want the index. We want to get child by name. Get node. Where are we at? Oh, yeah. Node. Then should be able to comment this. Hey, what's broken? Mob body. Why is mob body broken? Because these definitely work. Change them to be constants, but zero at no function. It just doesn't. I'm gonna stop, save. Do not understand. Why does mob body fail? because movement fails. Movement templates is null. Look at remote. Look at our core game. Has a movement, but movement has no child nodes. So what is it about this? What is it about the player body that makes that work, that it doesn't work on a movement object? Because this should exist. Like, once we're through with the ready function, we should have movement templates. Still no. Weird. Oh, we don't instantiate it. We don't instantiate it. If we create the scene for a movement, then that should get us what we need. Let's try that. We have already derailed. Such is the way this stream works. Where do we create that movement object for the first time? Move that to mob body, didn't we? Mob factory. We moved it to mob factory. Create mob movement. Okay, I think this is where things are going wrong. We want it to be an object with child scenes so that we can attach things to it. And that we can use template objects to populate it. But we need to instantiate that. We need that to be a concept we can use. Mob Factory is a global. So we could set up a packed scene in it that is, this is a movement object. I don't think we can export in a global. Let's say a packed scene. Can I even do that? Can I populate it in the globals? Okay, I can't because it's not something that exists as an instance in the world. Can I instantiate it? Can I just instantiate it? We don't want it to just be a new node. We want it to be an actual instance of the scene. We want it to be instantiated in the world right away without having to attach it to the scene by itself. Hey there, Squinnick. Welcome, welcome. We are puzzling through how to handle an oddity in what we're seeing. I want this node to exist right up front. But if I just do movement.new here, if I just instantiate the class and not the scene, then it doesn't work. So what? For science here, we are going to load, and we are going to pop one of these right there. Instantiate. We have my body's movement is set. It childs it. Okay. So we set it, it attaches it to the scene. Okay. All right. We removed the need for that. But next, we need to get rid of this. This would be a problem. We don't like this kind of thing because this is an absolute path string. If the path to a movement scene changes, this breaks. And that's a maintenance headache. Even if we were to put a bunch of constants elsewhere, that would mean we'd need to find and change the constant every time. Don't like, don't want. We really do need a sort of master scene that has all of the variables loaded into it, so that we can access them, that it can populate a global object. So if we look at core has nothing to it. Well, it preloads some stuff, but this is where I think we can clean things up. This is the logic that shows the menu, shows the game, that kind of thing. So this is the main game. This is what it do. Yeah. So what we can do is we should be able to have packed scenes in that. And we instantiate them at this point instead of preloading it like that. So if we Let's look at our game scene here. We have veered off. We're doing something completely different than what I plan to do. I want to clean up some of this logic here. So the game object itself has a whole bunch of exports to it. Its collision zone, its tile map, that kind of thing. So that these things can be passed to other objects. They are not instances of it. I like the idea that the core object is creating and removing scenes that it does or does not need. That means the game scene is completely rebuilt when we start a new game. We don't have to have a reset to 0 kind of process on it. So what we'll do is we'll go into our core, and we're going to have copy that over. It's the main menu scene, and it is the game screen scene. Look at core scene. I don't think this will work for it just yet, but yeah, okay. This needs to be a packed scene. Just like this one. So the main menu is one of these, and the game is one of these. So here we can say show main menu. We can just say main menu scene.instantiate. And just like this, we can say game screen.instantiate. And I totally didn't just break. Ta-da! So then if I look back at the code and I look at the remote tree, we're at the main menu, so there's just the main menu control. If I go back into it and I start, I go back in, and I look at core, under remote, there's just the game scene. Okay, that's a start. This is a start. What I want is core to be more of the agent of setup here. Now I can have another entity that does it, and I may set that up where there is another entity that everything will consult. Because this thing is the handler of menus. But I can probably utilize it for multiple things here. So past here is the handling of screens, like which screen to show. But so, additionally, I would like to have some global variables and entities set up here. So the mob factory can really benefit from knowing what a movement scene is. I want to find more things like that where is the mob template using those? Oh, I know the mob template uses that. Okay. But say in global nodes, we had some other properties here we want to mess with. This would be a good place to load them up. Where else? Oh, catalogs. Catalogs would be a place to populate that. The game doesn't populate it. That's something that's set up in the core. What else could we do for that? I wonder. Just real quick here. So these are our globals. taking a quick look. How about the compilation? Do I have anything for that? I'll have to look at this. I'd like a way to go in and set up some different things. I want to move away from populating all of this in game, but that might be the way to do it. Because most of this stuff is relevant to the game. Like, this is relevant to core, but not to game. The reason I'm thinking of that is that it can be useful for debugging purposes to swap out an entity, but you have to be really careful about doing that because it can still contaminate the test if your testing entity doesn't properly represent what would really happen. So let's continue down the road that we have been, where we look at game, and game has a whole bunch of things that it populates in order to prepare the globals. So I'm going to add a function that is explicitly that. Pass in here so it doesn't pitch a fit earlier. Hey there, Zell. Welcome back. Welcome back. We got derailed a little bit. I figured out a way in Mob Factory to avoid having to manually create the movement node. And what I've realized is that previously with this movement object, which is a scene, it doesn't actually need to be a scene. But I want it to be able to be destroyed cleanly, because movement templates are scenes. And if the movement isn't a node scene, then cleaning them up requires special operation. And I want to avoid manual garbage collection anywhere I can. So we want to use this. We want to instantiate it. But we don't want to do it by string path reference. So what we need is that the mob factory have a reference to the movement scene. And I still think a global collection of scene objects would be where we go. Well, thank you, Proto. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I think that's where we could create a new global that is like scene map. Fire away. We are a chat-heavy stream here, so if you got questions, go ahead. Otherwise, it will be stream of consciousness of me coding. It's not where we should be adding mobs to that. We need to move that to the mob factory. That's a tricky one, Proto. Everybody mourns in their own way. And it can often seem very foreign if you try to describe your own way of doing it to someone else, especially if you try to press that on somebody else. I'm trying to decide how to articulate how I've been through that kind of thing in the past. I mean, if it's just condolences, you do have my condolences. That's always a hard thing to go through. For some, it can be comforting to do the spreading of the ashes kind of ritual. For me, I do have, to some extent, it's kind of a little shelf with with the boxes of ashes on them. It's not something that I dwell on. Uh, Dwelling on that kind of thing is not psychologically good for me. uh, but the idea that the memorial is present is something that gives me comfort. So, like I said, the spreading of the ashes can be a sort of moving on kind of ritual. There can be a lot of different things. So if you think a memorial might be a good thing for you to work with, then deciding, is it going to be like, ashes? Is it going to be some object related to the animal that you keep on a shelf, that kind of thing? That can be an element. I will say, in a practical sense, you may want to. No, it becomes an element if. Okay, no, that can be a way to do it. You will want to be sure of checking on things like utility wiring, and you want to make sure to bury it deep enough if you're in an area that is frequented by feral animals. Because I would say having the grave dug up would not be a good thing. Okay, I need to clean this up. I need to clean this process up. So the game wants to prepare game globals, but maybe if we just make that a core entity. Yeah, let's pull the trigger on that. Okay, core is going to have a new entity that is going to be a global preparation object. Yep. And that kind of thing can be nice. It's some people find things like graves and memorials that you can visit something that's comforting. A place that you can kind of revisit the memories, I do not at all. But I do understand the sentiment, and I know that works for some folks. Pepper has come to sit with me. Well, thank you, Proto. Thank you. We are pretty regular on streams. Mostly regular on streams. The programming streams have become the main thing we do. But I am trying to weave more gaming content in earlier in the day. So let's see. Cat-wise, camera 1 currently has Sherbet. He's the tan and white blotchy one. The tree has Sky on it. That's his sleeping spot. He's big and fluffy. Then Sammy is currently on the bed. Like I mentioned, Ember's on my lap. It's getting back scratches. Let's see how long he stays on camera 1. Sherbet doesn't get a lot of screen time. All right, so I was going to start with a different target, but I've decided I want to get more and more of this out of... I want to make sure that this kind of thing isn't where it doesn't need to be. This isn't a global nodes thing. This is a mob factory thing. Other entities in the world don't necessarily need to know what's in the different nodes. But I can load them into other areas. So a game knows what they are. A game populates them. But I don't need them to be everywhere. So we're going to have... So we have universal global nodes. We have game global nodes. How are we going to do this? Right now, game is handling all of it. Is that the worst thing? Well, let's clean it up and see where we go from there. Export, what is it? Category, and it will be catalogs. There, then I want to clean it. Maybe that'll help. Maybe this will help me not feel like it's a terrible thing. Export collision zone in the inspector adds these categories. It's not accurate. Collision zones are also world parts. We're just going to move that to world. Be a generic. Okay, maybe that'll help me keep my sanity here. I don't like when it gets so disorganized, you know? This may help by categorizing them into buckets. That may help me keep it organized. Because all these are game things. Still makes sense to me. Welcome back, Nugget. The same mobs. As we say, player template. That's the player template. And we could have export our movement templates. This is a packed scene. It's movement scene. Hey there, Nightmare. The cat on the screen currently is Sherbet. He is one of the two youngest. I like that that's a packed scene, but that's kind of clumsy. Where did I put it? Movement scene. Oop. So then we can go into our mob factory. As a packed scene. And we go into our game again. If you have questions or want to chat, anyone, feel free. I might get distracted and take a moment to see it. But since we're coding, a lot of this will be me just explaining what's going on, just to keep my train of thought going. do. Let's say this is fixed globals. These don't change. Factory dot movement scene to movement scene. Then we go into our mob factory, and instead of this, we can say movement scene. And in our game, we need to make sure we call fixed globals here. Okay, still functional, still functional. I don't have monsters spawning or weapons spawning by default. We're not testing with the monsters yet. The little bubbles are a placeholder that triggers the creation of weapon objects. And with this done, I think we're able to move on to that. I still need to refactor this mess here. This should be moved to mob factory. This should be in constants. These are kind of accurate, but these don't need to be known to everything. These are really only mob factory concepts. Well, game world concepts the mob factory needs to know when it does this. Same with things like get mob count, get mob. All of these should be handled by the mob factory now. And these should be constants. Those should be constants. Okay, but let's... We're going to do that now. Let's do that now. Okay, and then this is going to cause a bit of an explosion while I'm working with it, but so we should have a whole bunch of other things that are broken as a result of this. Okay, and then in Mob Factory, we're going to remove this reference. Exactly, Zell, exactly. We add it to the tree. We don't actually have to add it to the tree right away. We could mess with this other stuff earlier, but... I think we're working here. The mouse spawn still works. Okay. All right, Proto. I hope it goes well for you. Yeah, mob count seems relevant. Mob pool type should be a something else. A constants. dot mob type. There we go. You too, Proto. All right. We're getting there. We're getting there. We're gonna resume breaking stuff. Move you to constants. We'll need that elsewhere. We're going to be looking for places that have global node in it so that we can fix them. Instance. Oh, this is Mob Factory. Not get. Is it? Get mob count. Oh. No, it's. Constants. Dot. Mob type. Enemy. Let's reload here just to be sure. Oh, I do need it. Wait. Factory. Get. Mob count. Constants. Mob type. Enemy. All right. We have cleaned it up. Global nodes is going to be for places that we don't even need has interface to be here. As interfaces entirely for mob bodies. All right, let's break things further. We'll have to organize the things again. Okay, so we should get a break somewhere in here eventually. No, I know where those will break. Mobs here. factory as interface. No, because that gets a mob body. And mob body currently isn't doing anything when it collides as its get interface. This is cumbersome. I may just remove this whole logic here eventually, but okay, global nodes now is currently for things that everything needs to reference. So the player is a universal entity. Anything in the game potentially needs to reference the player. Catalogs are going to be referenced by anything that potentially needs to reference. Thinking on it, this could be another good spot for this kind of thing. But no, these are effectively listings of weapons and objects. So a monster catalog has the blob monster explicitly referenced as if it's a constant. And I load a resource object into it to say, if you want to spawn the blob, this is what you use. Well, hello. And I don't know how to begin pronouncing that name. Because KSI would likely be a confusing thing to folks. So if you can give me a hint, otherwise I'll go with K. All right, so we've got that working. We're doing well. We're doing well. We have just done a little bit of a refactor, and I think we can switch gears. 3? Okay, 3 will do. I will endeavor to remember. We just did a bit of a refactor, and now I think we want to proceed with our actual target for the day, which is setting it up so a player can have weapons on them modified. I do not play Roblox. It is a common enough question, but I do not. Nope. Let's see. Current games I play. I play a lot of Helldivers 2, and I have started playing, I think it's like Ayuden Chronicles, which is a very heavy spiritual successor to Suikoden. I have played Minecraft in the past. What's going on with that camera? Oh, well, there it is. Oh, that's right. It's camera 1. Camera 1 doing camera 1 things. It's not a hard thing to start. And the difficulty and what will result from it largely depends on what you're trying to do. Okay, I think so you want things to be able to interact with the player. And I think directly referencing the player is going to be just as good as anything. But this is like... These are see, I don't want to globalize these. I don't want, like, the HP of an entity to be part of a global object. So there can be... The concept of there being multiple players is not out of the question. We're using a different player object now. Yeah, we're using this. Okay, so let's get rid of this one. There we go. I do like cats. That is as much an excuse as anything to show my cats. We can currently see 3 of them. We have, let's see, you're looking through tall form, so top to bottom we have Sherbet, then Ember, and then Sammy. Not visible are Sky and Mason. Interesting. Oh. In the Sky peeked into one of the cameras there for a moment. You can just see him in the lower right of the play area, the one with the big black cushion and boxes. He is getting some food. That's why he's sort of visible there. There's some food trays where he is. Yeah. I try to keep him on camera all the time. Hello there. Hello. Welcome to the coding stream. Player object doesn't need this test object anymore. So let's make sure we don't have a reference to it anywhere, and we'll rip it back out. Discard. Okay. We'll get our player here again. Projectiles doesn't need to be player projectiles. I have 5 cats, where? And 3 I do not know Spanish. I can really only speak English. I'm going to remove this player projectile category. Is redundant. I'm afraid I probably wouldn't absorb anything. Like, I can recognize some words in Spanish, that kind of thing. But as far as learning the language, I would need to set aside more time and effort to accomplishing that kind of thing. It can be where there is a... How would it be called? There's kind of a savings at scale. Like the litter cleanup operations, the likelihood of food waste diminishes as there are more of them. It's you start to figure out a way to consolidate facilities. I would say much more than this, and it starts to get too much of a... the logistics start to get more difficult. But things like... maybe like a couple of cups of dry food and potentially a couple of tins of wet food can be gone through in a day. It varies as to how active and hungry they are. But once you get things like water fountains and your litter containment system of choice rolling, then it can start to do a little better. I ended up investing in a couple of litter robots. They are... It's a tumble litter box, but it's automated. Oof. There is some dog food that I would say I'd rather eat the dog food. If you're talking wet dog food, there is wet dog food that is effectively bad hamburger. So yeah, I would totally go for that. Hot sauce. most hot sauce tastes terrible. And I'm not fond of hot sauce that goes to the extent where it's just pain, you know? Like, I like a little spice, but there's a limit. And it can't taste disgusting. Sardine, you mean? Where? And I would have no idea, Con. Your profile pictures are kind of tiny from here. Coding is going well, Con. Coding is going well. Well, thank you, Jess. Thanks for swinging through. Have a good sleep. Let's see here. You know, it feels like something, like there's something at the edge of my mind there, 3, but it doesn't ring a bell. What's the answer? Okay, in player body, we need to start adding some stuff. What I would think is that there are going to be global functions that can interact with a player object. And that might save me the trouble of having player be a global node. Because then you can call global functions and say, give me the player. Like, give me player X. Same game, Con. We are doing testing on the projectile generators, the weapons in the game. Yep, that's what we're doing on this stream, 3. So I've got these testing objects that if... Oh. Factory. Oops. Missed one. Yeah. Let me fix this. I changed some of the locations for some global variables and functions. So there's a lot of stuff that I probably missed and broke here. All right. Well, let's... All right. Where are my scenes broken then? We're gonna... Player... Don't save that scene. Scene game. Oh, okay. Cancel. Yeah. Don't save that. Sardines. Okay. So one of the elements of that is that most cats don't naturally eat fish. Despite the kind of... It's commonly held that cats like fish, But if you think of a standard domestic cat, where are they going to get an ocean-dwelling fish? Like salmon or sardine or any of that kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily bad for them, but I wouldn't put it up there as like, oh, that's an ideal food, you know? Yes, that scene has been deleted or removed. We're going to close all of those scene tabs. Save again. Going to reload the project. Okay, okay. One can only hope, 3. One can only hope. In the meantime, it's day by day, you know? Okay, let's get those things to show you what's going on. We're going to set this to be once a second as soon as we touch a bubble. We're going to say 3 groups of 3. Oh, 3 groups of 3. And they random direction, random mob, straight line. Okay, they're just going to spread out wildly, but I haven't tried the multi-threading API. I know there are toggles for that, but haven't messed with that. Might have to look into it for performance reasons down the road, but we'll see. Yeah, C# was one of the things that was attractive about Godot to me, is that it would give me access to that. I kind of like that programming language. But right now I'm doing this to learn GDScript fully. If I do use C#, it will be to try to take some of the burden of intense calculation off of GDScript, since the scripting is apparently better at manipulating the objects in the world, like messing with a sprite or something like that. But C# will outperform in raw calculation. Like if you're doing a whole lot of math or that kind of manipulation, the C# will outperform unless you do a lot of extra. Okay, we need to find a bubble and touch the bubble. And this should... So we've got those going. Now, if we change our... We're going to change it so the blob spawner can be activated again. Should work. Yeah. So we got blobs. I wouldn't be able to begin to tell you. The text is very tiny for me. So each one of these little groups of mice that are spawning are targeting a different set of blobs here. Let's switch it down to no groups in our mouse spawner here. I can definitely see the 12 in there. Okay, we need to find a bubble again. Okay, so this is a 180 spread. Well, it's a 3. So each projectile is firing in like that hard arc here. That is solid advice there, Con. In general, folks, if you can it's good internet practice to not declare things like age, location, that kind of thing. Some people get creepy. This is not a prohibition, just, you know. Okay, so if we change it to be Let's make it a little more apparent what's going on here. So if we make 10 of them, 11 of them, nice odd number. In lieu of the bubble con, we made an actual sprite for the weapons. They are little wind-up mice. We've currently got the spread shot set to a 360 spread. We can make inherited versions that will treat it different. But you can see the lead mouse, like this one that I'm standing on, aims at a particular target when it appears. Then if we remove move in straight line, and instead we're going to go into our movement logic. Spawner, it's not scenes. Projectiles. Actions, no. Behaviors, there we go. Moving, straight line, move towards target. So then if we go into the mice, is still here, projectile mouse. And what we're going to do is we're going to use groups instead of count. Coding, 3 coding is a matter of practice. It's akin to learning a written language. Well, I figured you were somewhere more in the UK or in the European area, since you mentioned pass, merit, or distinction kind of stuff. Yeah, effectively 3, it's practice. If you want to learn to code, start coding. There's a lot of really good systems for learning out there, like things to try, things to look at. It can there, where it's the more physics operations you do in the game, the more GD script pulls ahead in C# performance. But in general, it's a matter of being flexible and learning. Adapting to multiple programming languages is still a good thing to do. If I have to pick up another toolkit that uses a different language in the future, learning to adapt quickly is still a good skill set. I don't know 3. It doesn't. The name doesn't ring a bell. Okay, if we add groups, so we're going to add, instead of having 10 projectiles, well, 11 projectiles, we're going to have 10 groups. And we should see the difference here. No. Did I break? They're not spawning. Oh, okay, yeah, I've seen that. I don't think I've played it. Not really that engaging to me. Okay. What did I break? Maybe every 3 seconds. Did I change the wrong variable in the homing mouse? Oh. Yeah, I know what I broke. Well, what I didn't break. I forgot to touch a bubble. The bubble is part of our current testing. Okay, so now it's firing off 10 groups. And these groups are slowly drifting towards targets. So each group acquires its own target. Here, let's speed up their homing behavior. Welcome back, King. Let's go find a bubble. A live 2D model, I think I got a good deal on this one, ultimately. The ones that you see... All right, thanks for joining us, 3. The prime examples of them, the most expensive ones, are very, very expensive. I have heard of some models being well into 4 digits in US dollars. And there have been like mutterings of like a low 5. Because these can be really extensive artistic endeavors, even if it's, whether it's live 2D or it's a 3D model. They can be very extensive work, both in like art and rigging. Okay, I've clearly broken something. We're just going to fire one projectile. And let's see, move home to target. Okay. I'd rather not say. But or a model like this, you would expect hundreds. Like, you're talking 3 digits in this territory. And the more added to it, the more detail, the more things that it can do, more range of movement, the more it's going to cost. Now, alternately, if you're confident in art and similar, then you can kind of go through the ecosystem of 2D models like this, where they tend to start with a flat model, then move on to a flat image with multiple poses that they switch between for things like talking. The standard being like, there's blinking, mouth open, mouth closed, that kind of stuff. Then dabbling into this territory, you can get from the flat images to images with a bit of animation to them, so they don't just pop between images. And after that, you do start to get into territory where it's like getting into 3D or getting into live 2D, which are systems encoding in and of themselves. So I'm using the signals in here as far as what gets attached, and I think delegates is, if it's what I'm thinking of, I do have a pattern in place that could facilitate that, but let me show you one of the things that we're talking about here. So in our game object, I have all these exported variables. These are where I can socket things in so that places in the code will have a reference to an entity that exists in the kind of the world map. So if I look at the game world here, game world has some simple structures prefabricated, but there are some things that I want code to know about up front. So if I wanted to swap in or test a new, like, a whole different monster catalog that had the same variables but with different things loaded into it, I could have a second one that I could swap in here. If I wanted to use a different template object for the player, I could load that in here. Stuff like that. So I can get a little bit of... I don't know if the pattern that I'm thinking of is the pattern that you're thinking of. I can never remember the names to some of these things. But the one I'm thinking of is being able to swap in different objects into the system. So, like, if I wanted to use a different object handler or the like, I could do that sort of thing here. Some of this is working with the way that Godot works. So this is the node tree, and I can access the node tree from code. Every entity can have its own script. So I can access that from code, but I don't want to access it in the normal way, which is by path. So say I want a movement template object, or I'm sorry, a movement template scene, then I would have to say it's something like, resources, spawner, movement, moving, that kind of stuff. I would have to do a string path to it. I don't want to do that, because if I change the folder structure, all of those string path references explode. If I change the tree structure and I'm using a node path, then the node path breaks. So instead, what I'm doing is, like in the game object here, it has its sockets to put in there, where I take this movement scene, a packed scene, and I stuff it in here so that subsequent places can use a reference to that without needing to find it by string path. But what that would let me do is swap those out. I could say, well, instead of this movement object, I'm going to test a different one, or I'm going to test using a different one, which can be useful. I don't know. Oh, man. I did a lot of work recently with what I think is a service-based model, and I like some of the principle of this. Well, I think delegation is the one that I'm thinking of, where at different stages in the program, I have kind of like this. I have a pile of objects that I say, these are the objects you're going to use. And that subsequently down the line, those only get passed where they need to be, and they get socketed in where they need to be used. So I don't have hard-coded at a particular place, hey, this is the global what's it. It's that what's it gets set up early on. And for testing purposes, I could have a shell of that will kind of fake or test the way that it's supposed to behave. Like maybe a wrapper around the base one, so that we can validate when A comes in, B comes out, kind of stuff. I like that pattern. I like the ability to easily convert running code into unit test code. Will I be able to do that with Godot? Ooh, Wouldn't be able to tell you where. I've been doing programming for long enough that I hear patterns being discussed, but I haven't absorbed the names of them enough to be able to remember them on the fly. If I am shown a code base that uses a particular pattern, I might be familiar with it. But being able to quote them, I don't know. I always get them mixed up. I learned coding when object-oriented versus functional was kind of the question of the day. Like that was the new tech that was in the programming textbooks and lesson plans. Was object oriented was the ascendant thing. You know, the world has moved on substantially, and I've learned that a lot of what we call things and how we do things moves pretty quick. There was a period where I recall people saying, "Oh no, we don't do objects anymore. We're doing function-based programming," and it's like, wait, that's what we did way before. What ends up happening a lot is there's a cool new pattern, and it does what it's supposed to do really well. But some folks will take it too far. They'll go overboard. Like object-oriented is really easy to go overboard with. Focusing on, strict inheritance and object appearance kind of stuff. I don't know if I don't think I'll ever make it like an open source code project. But I do intend to have a period where there will be some testing, and in some form the game will be available. Like its inspiration, I'm not planning on this being like a AAA high dollar value game. If I do release it, I intend it to be cheap. A big part of this is the let's all learn coding together kind of thing, Let's all learn Godot engine together. I think, for example, what would it be? You mentioned C# script. Oh, like I said, I take a little bit of I'm taking a lot of inspiration from things like Vampire Survivors, so it would probably we're probably talking less than $5, $1 kind of thing. This is as much a project that I want to prove to myself that I can do it. Making a game has always been one of those things that, especially a lot of people that want to be programmers, at some point will be like, oh, I want to make a video game. And they either dip their toes in the water and get bit, and that they try to make something and it doesn't achieve what they want, or the tools that they set out to use are too complicated for what they want to do. Like I do see a lot of people that are like, I want to make a pixel like scripted RPG game. I'm gonna go get Unreal Engine. And they get burned and they think, oh, I can't do that. Or they spin their tires for a while and never get anywhere. And I've done a lot of things like that. There's a lot of things, but also the tools that we have available now compared to before are really good. Like, if you want to start making a basic platformer game, you can do that almost immediately in a lot of the engines that are available. Unity, Godot, all of those have like the physics engines that you would want to start with. Like the things that you would normally have had to build from the ground up are very robust. Yep. And very available. So I think one of the biggest hurdles that people run into is that you'll hear, I'm not an artist and I don't know how to program. And programming, like I mentioned before, is something that you learn by doing. You start doing it. You don't need to go to college for it. You don't need to spend years of study. It's get out there and try to do it. It's like learning a language. It's like doing any of these things. Can formal training help you with some things? Yes. but it's learning technical structures and the like. Yes. I think that's where some training, whether it is like one-off professional training like seminar stuff, or just reading some technical books, can be useful. Learning things like design patterns and what they're good for. You don't want to fall into the trap that this design pattern is the best pattern ever and you should use it for everything. Instead, it's learning the hows and the whys of different things so that you can learn what to put together and what to do. There's a good story that floats around in game development. Are you aware of the game Undertale? As I do it. It's doing a thing. Oh. Go into our... So Undertale is relatively famous. Not an expensive game. Its graphics are not terrible at all. Its music is phenomenal. And frankly, the music is something that Toby Fox is excellent at. At the time of Undertale being made, I don't know if Toby Fox has gotten better during the Deltarune era, but the code of Undertale is a horrible mess. From a, like, if you are a coder, if you're somebody that likes to program, it is horrifying. But the gameplay is excellent. The presentation is excellent. So it doesn't matter. You can sit down and your code won't be professional, but if you... I'm sorry. Professional is not a good way to market. I've joked before, professional means you get paid for it. You can go out and be a professional house painter and you can make a terrible mess. But if you got paid to do it, you're a professional house painter. So the more colloquial reference of pro, if you want to be really, really good at it, that's a time and practice thing. But you can still create a good product. And some of it is, again, a learn as you go. These collision zones that I have here, the reason that these exist is not because that's the out-of-the-box tool. I mean, ultimately, I think a good way to summarize that is gameplay is king. How you get there, what you use to get there, is largely irrelevant. If the game is fun, if somebody plays the game and for them the cost to value ratio is excellent, then you did the right thing. And yeah, it's a good hierarchy to work with. Is if the game is solid and it is enjoyable to play, then it's how you do it. The question is, how can you get there? And to that effect, that system and code, like that order is a decent way to go. I would actually put story and art can technically come a little later. What I would aim towards is saying like the order that I would put forward is gameplay and art, then system, and then fine-tuning the story. Code could still be the last thing. But the reason that I throw system out there is that's about the time that you want to be deciding. Once you've decided what will the game be, once you've determined what the game is, you have your specification for it. So I came into this saying, I'm going to make a Survivor style game, and I'm going to use pixel art. Those two choices inform what kind of toolkit you want to set out to use. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're doing simple pixel art, Unreal Engine might not be where you want to go. It's not that it's a bad tool for it, it's that that's a big, powerful tool that you're probably going to have to jump through a lot of hoops to dumb down for what you want to accomplish. There are other tools that, while they don't have necessarily the high-end functionality that Unreal Engine might bring you, they're built more for those smaller projects, so it's easier to hit the floor that you want to run on without having to do extra work or learn more complicated tools to accomplish it. After you've determined that, then deciding like, oh, I want to have that detailed story, and that story will necessitate different ways that I present the code. That's story can wiggle, but I would still put the story behind the art, in that presentation matters a lot in which engine you're going to pick and which tools you need to choose. Are you going to use 3D modeling software like Blender? Do you need to learn that? Are you going to use, like, I use Sprite for the art. I could use Krita. I've used Krita for some stuff before, and it does pixel art just fine, but Sprite has a lot of tools that make it easier for me to make the kind of sprites that I am. So it's, you pick your tools. And I think the story comes a little later because there's some flex there. But if you want a robust storytelling system, then you also want to determine things like, are you presenting it with text? Are you presenting it with voice actors? What tools do you need for that? Story is very important. I don't want to downplay it. But the reason that I put it after that is that unless you have written your story up front, if you're approaching it as, I want to make a game, it's very easy to get trapped if you start with story. If you start very early with story, you're putting the cart way before the horse there. You'll still want it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be necessarily as tangible. Or what would be a better way to put it? I don't want to downplay story as being a substantial impact on how a game can be presented and received. It's much more when you're starting out. Like, when you're making a game, you're ultimately making a product. You're making a package deal. And a big part of that is how you're going to put that together, what tools you need. And that first set of decisions should be, I need these tools. So I need to make sure I know these tools. If you have a story in mind already, if it's already prepped, great. But that story can actually be separate of those tool decisions, assuming you know, how do I want to present the story, which is more in that art question, the presentation of the story. So maybe you're doing a Dark Souls kind of thing where most of your story is in item descriptions, in which case that's part of your text presentation, your HUD, and the item descriptions, how to store those. Maybe it's like your Final Fantasy VIIs, where a lot of it's going to be text boxes and animations, that kind of thing. I referenced earlier that I was playing Eiyuden Chronicles, where most of the story is presented with voice work and text and animations and the like. So having that in mind as part of keeping all of that as the presentation of the game. What am I going to show them is still relevant, but you do want that. What's the gameplay going to be like? How do I interact with it? And what do I need to show them? And then pick your tools accordingly. Then learn the tools if you need to and proceed. I have played Disco Elysium. I didn't get far into it. It was a neat concept. I liked some of the general ideas there. The very abstract character system. Yep. I definitely empathize with that. Long games are a commitment. We're going to step away really briefly here. I will be right back. And I return. Yeah. Let's get back into it here. Okay, so I wanted some tools for interacting with a player. We're going to set it up so that we have... We're going to call it Player Factory for now. That'll give us some tools for generating a player object. And it will give us some tools for interacting with the player in the same way that we generate a mob. The player is a mobile object still. So it'll have those same methods, but there will be a special set of functions to either layer over top of that specifically for players, or just in addition to. So let's do a new preload here. Auto loads. If you're not familiar with it, auto loads in Godot are kind of singletons. They're your global objects. They sadly do not have a scene representation. If they did, that would actually be really convenient, because then I could attach things to them. But I get why they aren't. Functionally, I get why they aren't. So we're going to say player factory. Not really a factory model, but that's what we're doing. Bit. Suddenly struck with a question here. Extends node. Yep. They all extend node. Would it be a scene? Yeah, but then it'd have to be in a scene. But let's... So I'm just fiddling with an idea here. If it's a scene object, then that lets us preload things. I don't think we'll be able to preload them across like the game objects in the game scene. I wouldn't be able to preload, but could I preload templates and catalogs this way? Okay. Then we need to keep an eye on a couple of things when this is happening, but it's going to go into our process function here. Print debug. Say string player factory test. Factory. Back into our game script here. When we process, we're going to do a debug print on playerFactory.test. Zero. And then if I go up to test scene here. Okay, I had to check it. So what I did is I created a scene that was attached to a global script that was preloaded, but it does not preload the scene. It preloads the script, which means there isn't a lot of reason that I would need that. The scene thing, it doesn't do anything for me. Hello, Ember. It just means that the pattern that I've been using of feeding the global entities their data as and when it becomes available is how we will proceed. Ember has come over for some pets, so she gets some snuggles. So, delay by cat. Delay by cat. See how many kitties we can see in the interim. Looks like Mason is looking out the window. He might see a critter. So that only means Sherbet is MIA right now. He could be nearby where Mason is. Okie dokie. Let's think here. Okay, so we need to create the player object, which if we look in... we look in our game code, we have a spot for that. Or we're going to use player template. This is fine that we continue to add the camera to the player this way, but we don't need to set the global node player there. We could actually... yeah. We're going to take all this for a moment here. We go into our player factory. We'll look at our mob factory first, just so we can... might be able to move has interface out of mob factory now, but we'll see. Create mob body. Okay, we're going to do player factory function create player. Do I want to have an integer off this right away so that we could say create player X? We're going to have player number as an int off of this for now. It will be irrelevant for the time being. As player. We need the player template, which is normally in the game object, which we will set into the mob factory. The player factory, it needs a player template. Which means in the game, we have to say player template factory dot player template is equal to player template. Okay, right now it's got this, and then I can have default it in so that you don't have to pass it, so that any use of the function right now will actually still work. I think having arbitrary players or players removed doesn't make a lot of sense just yet, but I don't know if we'll actually use this. Okay, now we need to find anything that references the global node player. I haven't checked, is there a good find in project? There isn't. There isn't. I might have to get a Notepad Plus instance or something like that set up so I can do search files. Okay, so go back to game. I'm going to do player is equal to player factory, create player. And we attach that. We don't set it to global node there. It gets handled elsewhere. And then we add the camera. Player is equal to mob factory. Player player factory dot get player. Player dot position. Oh no, okay. Vector 2. Instance. Still have player position up here. Make sure that's still working. Blobs are being created. Bubble. I think the homing logic is broken, so we're going to have to fix that. Is it still doing straight at kind of movement? Which is weird. So this one always updates as long as it gets a target, it moves towards it. So let's as a target object. Target direction isn't getting... Direction to target. It can turn at most 180 degrees. That doesn't make sense. Have a local target. Direction to target is set. The turn limit is within the available thing. So we're going to look at local target right now. That has been updated. Okay, these are mobs homing in. Temporarily remove their home to target. We are spawning blobs, but we are, they don't move. No target object. Okay, therein lies our problem. Okay. Targeting random mob. Oh. And this should work. Random mob. Something broken in target random mob, and I'm not going to be able to proceed until I fix everything that's currently active. Let's go find a bubble. Okay. Dot target object. This'll air out. Instance dot type enemy count as an integer to factory.get mob count of type entity enemy. It's mob count here. Okay, that should all function now. We should have some bubbles around the edge now. Okay, we have a target, but we don't have a target object. So we step in, we get mob count. Mob count, there are 20 things. I'm going to get a random mob index. I'm going to hit the fourth one. I'm going to ask the mob factory to give me a target mob. Then it has a targetable interface. So we're going to set the target object. I'm going to get the direction to it. And now this was the target we were passed in, but we care about calculate target only insofar as we have a target or not. Pause that. Now we're going to go back into our blobs. We're going to add our home to target movement again. We need home to target. So we target the player, we move towards the player, but we avoid other monsters, is how we've got the blobs moving. Okay, blobs should be moving towards me yet. Okay. Grab a bubble, and now every 3 seconds we get a... It's homing now. Excellent. The chain of events for movement, target acquisition, and movement might still be a little wonky. I need to work on that. So each one of these is firing off, locking onto an independent target, and homing in on it. They can move at most 180 degrees at any given time. And that can be constrained. There could be slower or faster homing. Such that they have to do wide arcs to get to them, kind of thing. Okay. Okay. Now we need to go in to our... Where are we at? Where are we at? Well, we're going to wrap up a little bit early today. I didn't get where I wanted to, but we have made a lot of adjustments to the system that I think are worthwhile. So we started today. Where we wanted to get was to start having... Oh, what would it be? We wanted to get towards testing adjusting the weapons on the fly. We did not get to that. Instead, what we spent time doing was mostly refactoring the global structure and getting some of that working. So we've got the mob handling logic ensconced in our mob factory global. We've got the player creation in our player creation global. Got all of our constants moved into our constants global, such that this should be able to go away. Let's verify that. There. Factory. Get player. Player factory. There we go. So global nodes is rapidly reaching irrelevance, which is good. It was overly general before and was going to become a maintenance problem. So we've moved all of its functionality into largely mob factory, some into player factory. Player factory having the, it is the source of truth for getting player objects. So create it, get it, remove it, that kind of stuff. Right now there is only one player entity, but I'm going to, by putting this player number in here, I'm going to try to future-proof it a bit. We'll put a number in each player object so they know their number. We'll get from there. Test scene. Okay. But yeah. Next time will be Friday. We're going to try to get through weapon creation then. We'll see how it goes. So, folks, if you like what you saw and would like to see more, remember to like, follow, subscribe, that kind of thing. It will help the algorithms present you future things like this. And in the meantime, I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Well, sorry you arrived just at the end there, Connor, but nice to see you again. We're going to be picking up our stream on Friday. So, hope to see you then if you can make it.